I'm back at the sewing machine and I'm ready to do my satin stitching around the word joy. The satin stitch, remember we said earlier, we're going to use a width of 3.0 and a length of 0.2. The machines all stitch a little bit differently and everybody has a different visual preference. So pick a stitch length and width that you like. This happens to be the one that works well for me on this project. We're ready to do our satin stitching now. The machine is set at a zigzag, stitch width of 3.0, stitch length of 0.2. I'm going to start on the Y like we did with the running stitch. I'm going to line it up, plant my needle, and I am stitching so that the middle of my zigzag stitch is covering the running stitch. So it'll go off the edge of the cuddle and onto the cuddle, encasing that running stitch. And as I stitch along, when I come down to the corner, I'm going to stitch to the edge, and then I'm going to stop with my needle on the outside so that when I pivot, the next step is going to go onto the inside. I'm going to do one more stitch here. It wasn't quite long enough. And then I'm going to run this way. Stop with the stitch on the outside and pivot and move up this way. Here I'm at the point where I trimmed, when I was cutting my red, I trimmed my plastic a little bit too short. So I'm just going to kind of hold it with my fingers as I stitch over it so that it's caught into the satin stitching as I go along. And these move real slow as you're going. It almost feels like it's hardly moving at all, but it is. Be patient with it. Sometimes I put my hand a little bit behind to help it feed a little bit. It really is going just fine by itself. And again, I'm stopping on the outside so that when I come up this way, my next stitch is going to go to the left and again encase that outer edge. As you're going around a curve, you need to pay attention to what side of the needle, what side of the zigzag the needle is on. Right now I'm on the outside edge of my J. I'm going to go a little bit further, and then I'm going to pivot. And when I stop, if I pivot when the needle is on the outside of the J, I can move forward, and the other side of the left-hand side of my stitch when it forms will cover the zigzag the way it looks. If I stopped with the needle on the inside left-hand side and I pivot, it leaves a wedge, kind of a split between the stitch. And if I move now, it leaves a space between the satin stitch and the next stitch. So I always want to stop when I'm doing an outside curve like this. One more, sorry. I'm going to stop on the right-hand side. I'm going to move forward, and the left side of my stitch will meet the other previous set of zigzag stitches. I'm going to stop again on the outside, pivot a little bit more this way. So as I go, I'm going to do maybe 5 to 10 stitches, pivot just a little more. That's what's going to give me a smooth curve. If I go too far without a curve, my J will look like a straight section, and it won't be a smooth curve. It'll look like straight lines connected, which isn't what you're looking for. So I'm always going to stop, keep stopping with the needle on the right-hand side, and I'm working my way around my curve. Just a little bit each time. So I'm going maybe 1/4 inch or so at a time. Now as I'm ready to stitch the inside curve, I'm going to stitch along, and I'm going to stop with my needle on the left-hand side, so when I scoot forward, it's going to make a nice connection. So that satin stitch stays with a really nice fill. And here it's a smaller, tighter curve, so I'm just going to do maybe 3, 4, 5 stitches and little sections, 3 or 4 at a time, and work my way around that inside curve. And we'll get plenty of practice on that when we get to the O. As I go around the O, I just continue to do a few stitches, turn my fabric a little bit, a few stitches, turn my fabric. You can see how nice the pivot function is. If I turn off the pivot function, I do a few stitches, I stop. When I want to pivot, I have to raise my pressure foot, move a little bit, stop, move my pressure foot a little bit. I'm turning my pivot back on. You can see why. It makes it much handier. And I'm going to just keep going until I finish the O. Once your letters are completely stitched around, you're going to just tear the heat away a little bit. Kind of catch it with the scissors, and it'll pretty much peel out all the way down and around the stitching. Peel it away. Got a little fuzz there to clip. I've got just the tiniest little bit of plastic along that edge. Oop, and in this corner. I can peel back whatever I can. And the joy of this product, Heat and Gone, is that will truly be gone. I just touch with the tip of my iron that little bit of plastic and it'll just disappear. And there's my letters, ready to go. It's a great way to do applique with any type of texture. Terry cloth, Cuddle, even corduroy and velvet, things that tend to fuzz and fray. This way, with this process, your satin stitch keeps your edges down nice and smooth, and your stitching is real even. If you don't have that top covering, all the fuzz of the texture, the terry cloth loops, the velvet fuzz, any of that will come out along your edges. The other nice thing about this process is you don't have to reverse your design at all. You lay that plastic sheet, the Heat and Gone, over the top, trace around, so you don't have to worry about reversing your design. One last thing that I'm going to double check before I start to construct my pillow is I want to look around all the edges and double check that I've got all the plastic on, the Heat and Gone. I've got just a little bit on that corner. All I'm going to do is touch it with my iron, and I'm just gently going to run my iron right along the edge of, I'm not pushing down on the Cuddle at all, I'm just running my iron anywhere where that plastic might be just caught a little bit in that seam allowance, or excuse me, under my stitching. That looks good. So we are ready to go.